Good afternoon.
Let's see what Eric.
We'll call the Diversion Authority Finance Committee to order, and first item is 1A, roll call.
Mr. Montplaisir, Mr. Peterson,
I'm here.
Mr. Costin,
Yes, here.
Ms. Johnson,
You can take
Ms.
it.
McCall, here, Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson, Mr. Steen,
Here.
Mr. Gehrig, Mr. Redlinger, Dr. Mahoney,
Here.
Mr. Grimberg.
Here. Next item, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion or corrections?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And motion carries. Kent, do you have number 3?
Yeah, the bills total for the month, $1,865,154, largest of which is to the Cass Joint Water District for land acquisitions and other incidental costs, $1,691,027. And you can see on their list, there's one very large land acquisition on the list for approximately 1.2 million, so that's what makes up most of that expense. The rest is typical incidental expenses associated with housing and lot acquisition.
Questions for Kent? Hearing no questions, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Take the roll.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. McCall,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger, Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg.
Aye. Next up, Kent, financial report.
All right.
Kim gonna do financial? Or Kent?
Yeah, I'll do the one
Both.
that I normally do. Is that right, Kim? And then you'll follow with the
Yep.
program status, okay? On pages 14 through 27 are our standard reports. Starting on page 14, the 2019 spend year-to-date, $22,314,775, for a cumulative total project life-to-date of $476,047,797. And if you were to go to page 15, you can see that our net position is going up just because of the speed at which the project is going. There's the net position of $96,053,000. And the sizable amount still coming from the State Water Commission. We've submitted a couple of requests, and in June we should get most of that money. But anyway, good liquidity there. And on page 16, you'll notice that on a percentage of spend of the $162 million, we're clearly under budget at 14%. And the detailed reports of expenses and the life-to-date reports and the land reports and all other reports are included.
Questions? I don't accept the motion to accept the financial report. Moved or second? Second. Discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the roll.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. McCall,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye. Kim?
All right, PMC financial report. Actual expenditures to date are $476,047,797. That's in regard to the program budget based on 2018 dollars of about $2.75 billion, with a remaining program budget of about $2.28 billion. The backup is included in your packet. And then in regard to the fiscal year 2019 cash budget, the cash budget is based on $162,723,000. Paid to date as of May 31st is $22,314,000, leaving a remaining budget of $140,409,000. And the backup for that is in your packet as well.
Questions? And traditionally, we accept this report as well, do we not? So a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the roll.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Costin?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. McCall?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye. Mr. Redlinger, or Kim, are you finished?
Yes, I'm finished.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I will provide an update and overview on task order 5. Task order 5 is in your packet today, and we'll ask to take a motion at the end to recommend approval of task order 5 to the full Board of Authority. I just want to note at the outset, this is really the collective work product of not only the owner's administrative and technical representatives, but also the Jacobs CH2M team. A significant amount of time and effort went into making sure that we were setting this up in the right way for the next couple of years. And as owner, we have really invested a lot of time to make sure that we are reserving options later for our executive director, when that person will arrive later this year, to make sure that they are asking and requesting the types of program management services that they are going to need, as well as balancing that with the staffing and hiring that they want to do internally. So this is really a bridge task order. This is really a bridge to the future, and one that the executive director will certainly have some opportunities to weigh in on over the 2.5-year term. So in terms of the agreement itself, this is effective June 29 of this year through December 31 of 2021, so about 2.5 years. The subtasks are defined in Table 1, and a copy of that is in front of the committee today. Just a couple of highlights. We spent a good amount of time talking about not only the core program management functions, but the permitting and permit compliance reporting sections, as well as splitting out the federal and state legislative support services. You'll see 5F and 5G previously have been brought together and fused into one subtask. Those have been separated just for a bit of clarity so you can see some of the local work, as well as the Jacobs work in Washington, D.C., primarily through Matt Schiller on the federal side. We also have created 90-day written notice opportunities for the owner, the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, to provide notice to the program management consultant to off-ramp some of the services, specifically in the areas of program controls and reporting, 5C, again, the federal and state legislative support services I highlighted earlier, as well as public involvement in outreach services. It's likely that the new executive director will want to spend some time in that first year thinking about public engagement, thinking about the types of PR resources that they're going to want to have in their own office. So I would also note, too, and one thing that we talked about pretty extensively with the leadership of this committee as well as the board, is that there is some P3 due diligence time that is reserved in this task order. However, the bulk of that work, and you're going to hear more about P3 in July, Mr. Shockley will come back and talk about task order 6, and you're going to see a lot more detail on P3. So just know that this is not exhaustive to all things P3. That will be next month. So the level of effort and the costs are detailed in the attachments in the back of the task order. You will see again fiscals 19, 20, and 21 in attachment B, a total budget of $19.9 million, and behind that are the FTEs. The FTEs in total for the program, as well as broken out by the subconsultant AE2S. And so again, following any questions you have today, Kim and I can certainly address any questions, but we'll ask for a motion to recommend this task order 5 to be approved by the full Board of Authority.
Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The way I'm reading this is almost like unless we have major programmatical changes, this is a guaranteed maximum price. Is that
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. And in each of these subtasks, as you do in your monthly reports, you'll continue to see performance tracking on those subtasks. And so this is one that, I think that as we think about soft costs today, we, the administrative team for the owner, have said anything we can do for fiscal restraint today is a dollar saved that will help the program's bottom line in the later years. So we want to try right-size this as best as possible. We had a lot of in-depth conversation. We didn't take this out to 6, 7, 8 years because we wanted to really reserve that option for that exec director to say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, and to have some options and latitude for the owner in future.
Mayor?
Congratulations, move for approval.
I don't know if there's other questions yet, though. So.
You can ask questions, I'm just telling you, it's a great time to finally get this thing done.
He's trying to have a record meeting, and I want everybody has ample time.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now all right.
You can ask for further discussion, but I think it's taken a long time to do that. I think philosophically where you've come to is, rather than the 8 years, did the 3, we can renegotiate, rediscuss it. In 3 years, we may have some different things going on. But I'm pleased that it's finally worked to a point where everybody's happy.
I know Commissioner Steen and I spent a fair amount of time with the co-executive directors. I'm talking this through, and as chair, I'm satisfied to where we've come on the front end. This was, you know, an extended period of time, and there are a lot of what-ifs. And, you know, the what-ifs had a significant price tag to it. And, you know, one of the things, at least my sentiment is, we need to think and act differently today than we did last year and the year before, and then when this project started. We're in a different paradigm now with building a project, and we're figuring out the particulars wrapped around that. And so just the status quo of how things have operated for years with all these agreements really aren't, in my opinion, the precedents for the next 8 years. We need to rethink all that. And this is a step in that direction, and part of that is cost containment, cost savings where we can on the soft costs. And I think this is a good step in that direction. We're not done yet, in my opinion, but it's a step in the right direction to really rein that in and have control over that, so it's somewhat more predictable, because no one can predict beyond a week or two in some cases, let alone a year, 2 years, and 8 years from now. So, Commissioner Steen?
Just to follow up on that, thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a significant amount of input from the Finance Committee leadership, as long as the executive directors, as well as Mr. Shockley, weighed in on this agreement quite a bit as well. Appreciate his input.
Further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll take the roll.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Costin?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. McCall?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Grunberg?
Aye. 6B.
All right, co-executive director approved contract actions. During the past month, there were 2 co-executive director approved contracts. That was Task Order 16 Amendment 11 for HMG, $117,500 for permit submittal preparation and other related services. And there were Task Order 26 Amendment 2 for work in kind, again for HMG for $56,976. That was an Amendment 2, and that is for the U.S. Corps of Engineers requested hydraulic modeling to support design services. That was for information only.
Questions?
And then,
Moving along.
all right. And then also for information only, the Cass County Joint Water Resource District approved contract actions. There were 3 of them. Task Order 1 Amendment 2 to Appraisal Package Number 4 for Integra for $5,500. And then Task Order 1 Amendment 1 Appraisal Package Number 7 for Patch and Messner for an increase of $3,000. And then just so you know, on this last one, the backup that was submitted in your packet contained the wrong backup information. I provided Mr. Commissioner Grunberg with the correct backup, so he has that there. What's showing here on the slide is correct. There was Task Order 1 Amendment 2 to Appraisal Package Number 7 for Patch and Messner, which reduced the overall contract value by $11,000. And that was it on contracting actions.
Questions? Item 7, Mr. Shockley. 7A and 7B. And is Eric here? Is Eric Dodds here? Who's doing Eric Dodds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item that I have for the Finance Committee agenda today is the Wells Fargo loan extension. As you'll recall, last month I appeared before this board regarding the terms and conditions of the extension of the 2 Wells Fargo loans, the one for Cass County and the one for the city of Fargo. This board recommended approval of those terms, as did the Cass County Commission and the Fargo City Commission. Today is the formal resolution authorizing the extension of those 2 loans. We're not adding to the principal amount of those 2 loans. This is just an extension to extend the maturity date out. However, under the IRS tax code, because it's an extension, it results in a reissuance, so there's a number of documents that have to be done. Kent can certainly talk about any financial issues related to the Wells Fargo loans, but we're recommending approval of the extension. They are temporary loans, and they would be set to expire in another 2 years.
Questions for John? Commissioner Peterson moves for approval.
I had my finger up first. I moved approval.
You were going to make the motion, but I know Chad wanted to, that's why. So if somebody can second it, then you can
Trying
ask
to
your
get more
question.
than Chad this time.
Right.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Now, Mayor Mahoney.
You'd already been first and seconded. I think it's a great idea, great loan. Thanks. Good work.
Questions? Commissioner Peterson, you okay with that motion?
Sir, I am.
Just double check.
Well done.
I could see it written on your face. You wanted to make the motions.
All day long.
Other comment or questions? We'll take the roll.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Costin?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. McCall?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Grimberg?
Aye.
Chad, we sure are seeing chairmans taking some liberties, don't you think?
I'm used to that here, Mr. Mayor. You were here
I
yesterday.
learned that in the legislature, in the Senate Education Committee with Leighton Freeberg, who was the chair. If you weren't paying attention, in his case, he would make the motion for you, and then you'd like, what? What happened? Continue, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is related to opportunity for long-term financing of the project. Before you have an item that's outlined as WIFIA. WIFIA stands for the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act. This would be a WIFIA loan with US EPA. The WIFIA legislation is divided into two components. EPA has the component that addresses stormwater, clean water, and drinking water, and the Army Corps of Engineers has a program related to flood control projects. And you may be asking, why are we considering applying for a US EPA WIFIA loan? There are components of our project that qualify under stormwater protection, and therefore we may be able to be invited to apply for an EPA WIFIA loan. The first step in the process is to submit what is referred to as a letter of interest or an LOI, and that is, I put the draft in before you. We've been working feverishly on this for the last month to try to assemble it, and it has to be submitted by July 5th to the EPA. They will then review it, and then in a 90 days, we would have a determination of whether we would be invited to apply. WIFIA is very attractive to our project for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the repayment of a WIFIA loan does not commence until 5 years after substantial completion of the project. So we wouldn't have to make any debt service payments for a minimum of 5 years after the project is completed. Also, it has a repayment term of 35 years after the 5-year payment window is done. So that means it's essentially a 40-year payment term. And the interest rate is at US Treasury rates. And so we can't beat that in the private bond market or even with a bank loan. And then in addition, they allow us to sculpt our payments to match our revenue source. So in years where we have less projected revenue, we can sculpt our debt service. So it's a very attractive financing package. And so we will be requesting a loan in the amount of about $500 million. We based our letter of interest upon a similar project that has been invited to apply by US EPA. That is the Coachella Valley Stormwater Channel Improvement Project in California. That is also a diversion channel project. And so they were invited to apply to receive a US EPA WIFIA loan. The value of the loans for EPA have ranged from lows of about 22 million to about 520 million. So we are not out of line with what we would be requesting for a loan amount. So I would be looking for your authorization to go ahead and submit our letter of interest. It doesn't mean that we will get the loan. It's just that we're interested in applying for the process. And I would note that As part of this process, we are still very much in favor and support of U.S. Army Corps of Engineers WIFIA program being stood up. My understanding is that they are working very diligently on developing the rules for their program, and perhaps later this year we may see some rules for our Army Corps of Engineers program, but that would still take about a year for it to be fully funded and operational, and so it makes logical sense to try for some of these other programs. One of the other interesting aspects that we've found through this process is we may have up to about $50 to $55 million of eligible project expenses that we can apply to the North Dakota SRF program for long-term financing also. And so that next month I'll be probably bringing an application before you for that also. So we're trying to start to line up some of our longer-term financing, whereas the Wells Fargo deals with the short-term financing. This is longer-term financing. And I can certainly answer any questions you might have. I apologize for not having any slides. WIFI is a very neat program, but we're really trying to focus on getting this letter done, given the time constraints.
Mayor Mahoney?
John, I wasn't aware we had money available this year. Is it stating that this money might be available up to the 500 amount this year?
So that's a great question. The availability of funds, Army Corps of Engineers currently does not have availability of funds for its program, but US EPA WIFIA is actually currently stood up. It started last year with authorization for loans. This year they've authorized the second round of loans, and next year they'll have the third round of loans. And in looking at different projects and talking to different projects around the country, what we've seen is EPA WIFIA is now expanding what their scope of their book of business is. They started in year one very conservative water treatment plant or drinking water plant. Last year they started to expand their book of business into some of these other stormwater projects. And so I think our timing is good because our project is very novel, very creative. When I have had conversations with the director of the program, he seemed very interested in our project, so he was interested in having us apply for it. I would note that this is a very competitive program, so even though that we're submitting a letter of interest doesn't mean that we'll get it, but it's the first step in the process.
So we need a motion to send a letter of interest, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Been moved? Is there a
Second.
second? Seconded? Discussion?
I just wanted to put in a big thank you to John. I was on part of the team that helped populate the letter of interest. It's very comprehensive, it's very well written, and it was a heavy lift for him to get this done quickly. So thank you, John, for your work on that.
So noted. Put that in the minutes, please. Discussion? Questions? Hearing none, we'll take the roll.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Costin?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. McCall?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson? Yes. Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Grimberg?
Aye. Property status report. Is that Kim?
So Eric was unable to make the meeting today. He did say that the property status report is included in the packet. He wanted me to point out on page 60, it's this map here, one of these little maps or whatever, but he wanted me to point out that if you go to the north end of the project, last month you wouldn't have seen so many green blocks. And now we have a number of green blocks, which is showing progress. And the same more in the middle of the page, where last month, if you looked at this same map, most of these blocks would have been the tan color, which means that we're in the appraisal process. Now they've turned blue, so they're in negotiations. So it's showing that progress is being made.
Yeah, so just a high level between purchase, in negotiation, and appraisal pending. That extends from the northern point all the way to Horace, does it not? South of Horace. That's a significant
It's good progress.
percentage, yeah. Impressive. No motion is required, I assume, on this. Other business?
I just want to comment that we attended a joint water meeting about a week or so ago, and this issue about routing the reimbursement requests back and forth through Cass County and through the joint water and through Fargo. And they were hesitant to approve that process because the language of the law was somewhat ambiguous, and we had 2 or 3 different opinions about how we might handle that for expeditious processing. They chose to deny the request just on the logic that the law was unclear and they were wanting to follow it tooth and nail. So I respect that opinion. What that means is we'll continue to route in that same fashion until the 2017 money has been exhausted, and that will be sometime this year. And then at that time, I believe they would like us to take it up with a request then, when the time is right, to say, let's do this new process, which means the diversion authority will simply be the appointing or the approval process of those reimbursement requests, instead of, we're losing 30 to 45 days of time on these requests due to this routing process. And we have been lobbying the State Water Commission to tighten that process up. And I think we're making some progress, but we'll just have to wait this one out for the time being.
Kent, if, it's okay, Chairman, if the Water Commission said, when Mary talks to them in August, if she made that request, couldn't the Water Commission make that decision? It's a policy decision.
Well, we discussed that at the meeting, and I think their attorney, Sean Fredericks, had suggested that the law is the law is the law, and thou shalt not interpret it at the State Water Commission level, and that's what I took away from the meeting. And so a conservative play on that process would be to follow it at such time as that administrative hook stays in the law. It's going to fall out of the process in the 2019 appropriation, so we only have a few months to follow that process. So, but I just wanted you to know we'd had that discussion. And
Can't you find another lawyer that says something different? That Shockley might have a different opinion.
well, I'm sure you can, but they hire their own, so we are in the loop.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.